I have made a very simplified version of the lower portion of William Gaylord's five-legged creature, and I thought this might be a good example case to show how we can use TSM2 to rig non-standard characters in addition to the regular biped characters that we're familiar with. I've got my character and I've sort of aligned him so that he has one leg in the middle and kind of a left legs and right legs here. And I'll go back to the front view and I'll invoke the TSM builder plugin, and I'm going to skip the biped that we normally use and the quadruped and the multiped and just go right to this thing called parts and go down to legs and hit add, and this brings up another window that lets us choose some options for additional legs that we might add to a character, or in this case they will be the only legs that this character is going to have. This option right here lets us choose a type of leg, and our choices are biped, which is like the right and left leg a human being would have, bug, which is the sort of squat thing you see on ants and spiders, and then quad, which would be like the back legs of a horse. Bug sounds like it might be a likely thing in a creature like this, but actually that's probably has a few more joints than we really need. I'm going to go with the biped leg here. And then we have a choice here of unprefixed, which will just make legs that have numbers in front of them, or right, which will give us legs that are named like right, and then we would use TSM flipper to flip them over. I'm going to make one unprefixed leg and put it in the center, and I'm going to leave these other choices at their defaults because these are really things you would use if you were making like chimpanzee feet that had to pick up spoons and discs and whatever and act like hands, and we don't need that here. So I'm going to make one unprefixed biped leg, and then I'm going to make two right legs. So I'm going to have one biped leg that I'm going to put on this center leg, and we're going to add two right biped legs that I will maneuver over to fit onto these two legs here. And then we'll use TSM flipper to copy those over once we get those put in place. So I've got those. I'll hit OK, and apparently TSM only does whatever tab you're on. And so right now, even though there are settings here on these other things, this is the tab that's active and this is the one that'll make stuff. So I'll hit that and let's see what we get. We go to bones mode and we see indeed some bones have been made. It looks like only one leg, but what we really have are three legs. They just happen to be in the same place right now. We also have the body bone that you always get when you build something with TSM. That's going to be your main control for the character. Now obviously this set of legs is not in the right position and they're not the right size for this creature, so they need to be moved and scaled. And I can move and scale them all at once by moving and scaling this body bone. However, before I do that, I want to make sure that these IK foot control bones go with them, and right now they won't because by design they're not part of this leg hierarchy. So temporarily I'm going to make them children of their respective legs. So I'm going to drag that under the foot, and this one under its respective foot, and this one under its respective foot. And now, when I scale this or translate this bone, everything comes along the way it's supposed to. So first let's get this body bone about into the center of my fake body there. And now I'll scale this. Oops. I have to switch to scale. And now I have to sort of eyeball this so that this first leg segment is about equal to this segment here. And I'm thinking that is about right. And next I'll select just this one top bone of my middle leg and start using the rotate manipulator to swing this into position. And move that so that's about at the axis there. I guess I didn't eyeball that very right. That's a little bit too long, so I'm going to go back to scale and scale this down. And now back to my rotate manipulator and get that there. Now I'll swing the lower part into place. About like so. And that is just about a perfect match. That could be a hair longer, but I won't worry about it. I'll just say the creature's ankle is about there. We'll swing this foot into place. And I've got to zoom in here. Here's about where my toes break on my inexpensive foot. So I'll scale this up a little bit. And then just to be neat, I'll scale this toe down and flatten that out. And then we need to move this IK foot bone so it's right with the end of the heel, and so it's level, and then it's also nice to have that scaled about the same length as the foot, maybe just a little bit off so the end of that isn't quite matching the end of the toe and it isn't hard to pick. I've kind of got this leg swung into position from the side view. Let's look at some other angles and make sure this is actually in place, and it kind of appears to be. Yep. Okay. Now, next we got to do. Let's make one right leg be the front one over on the right here, and so I select its top bone and go to my rotate manipulator, and this will swing that whole structure around there. And now I'm going to go through the same process to swing that first right leg into position, and while I'm doing that I'm going to hide everything on right leg number 2 just so I'm not confused by it and so I don't accidentally pick it. And there isn't an exact side view to get a look at this, so I'm just going to kind of eyeball this here. But if you use these rotate manipulators, it'll still get into position. So let's swing this up there. And as I recall, this had to be moved like so. Need to scale it, so back to the scale manipulator. Get that knee lined up, and I should spin and say, yep, we're still pretty close there. I'm going to swing this over just a little bit. There. And then we'll swing this one in. As long as you use these rotate manipulators that just move on one axis, you don't have to get exact side and front views because they'll move along the planes that you have them set up on. And now we've got to get this stuff. I'll scale this now out to the toe joint. Scale this one down. flatten it. And then we got to get this one. This is going to be a little tricky without a correct side view. Let's see. Got to eyeball this one. How am I doing? I'm real close. Let's scale this down. So that's how I do the first right leg. And I'm going to pause the screen cam, and I'm going to go through the same procedure to do the second right leg. I'm going to swing it around and then crane the bones into position. But I'm not going to record that, so I'm going to pause the cam for a moment. And now I'm back. I have craned this last right leg into position there. And here's our overhead view. Now, before I go about using TSM Flipper to get the left legs, I really want to get these IK foot control bones back into the proper place in the hierarchy, and that's below the body bones. So I'm going to drag all of these back up there. And now we're back to our proper hierarchy. Actually, I realized I'm mistaken about the hierarchy here. These IK control bones should not even be children of the body. They should be free on their own. So I'm going to drag them up an even higher level. And there, that looks more like what we had when we first started. We saw the body bone and then these three IK foot bones. Because when we drag this body around, we don't want the IK foot bones going with them. So we've got that set right. Now I'm going to invoke TSM Flipper, and it asks me if I have saved this, and actually I did while the camera was paused. Actually, no, I haven't, because I just moved these bones. So I'm going to save this. And now I'll try again and run the flipper. And there we go. Now we see it has flipped the right legs over to the left, and now we have our one center leg did not get flipped as we want. And then we have the one first left leg and second left leg, and our first right leg and second right leg. So we have a total of 5 legs with their accompanying 5 IK foot controls. So far, everything is good. And at this point, I'll go ahead and run TSM Rigger. And I'm not going to worry about saving this because it's such an inconsequential step. If I had gone and done a lot of CP weighting at this point, I might. But since Rigger and Flipper don't flip CP weighting, I'm going to save that for the end. So we'll continue. And it goes through a quick assessment of what it sees there, and this is where you can check to see if TSM is on the same track that you are. Occasionally when you're moving these bones around, you might get the hierarchy messed up, and then TSM will recognize that something is wrong, and it won't list that body part here. So if you see a body part listed here, that means TSM thinks you have everything you need to rig that. And what I see here is my one unprefixed leg that is the center, and my first right and second right, and my first left and second left. So that all looks good. If for some reason I didn't want to rig something, I could choose a bone to be not rigged by hitting don't rig, and it grays it out. One reason you might do that is if you were adding the legs one at a time and then rigging them and then adding another leg. TSM might still recognize the base bones for one leg that you had already run rigger on, and you wouldn't want it to rig it again, and so you would select it and say don't rig. But in this case we want them all rigged. So I'll go ahead, hit rig, and we get to sit back and watch it chug through these. And this is really the magical part, because it's going through and adding a whole bunch of control bones and constraints that will make this all work with very little effort on our part. And now it's done. And look at all these bones it added. But they're all hidden bones. These are just control bones that you don't need to worry about. When you're animating these legs, all you'll really need to worry about mostly are these IK foot controls. Before we test this monster out, though, we do have to start assigning CPs. So I'm going to assign this center pod to the body bone. Like that took. And then I'm going to go through and expose the geometry bones on these legs one at a time so I can assign CPs from the legs to them. Notice in this long list of bones that TSM has made, the ones it has added, the control bones that you generally are going to ignore, are black in color here in the PWS. And the actual geometry bones that you were messing with after you ran Builder and Flipper, those have colors, and that's one way to tell those apart. So right now I'm just going to make visible the geometry bones for my first unprefixed leg, which is in the center. And let's start attaching some CPs. I'm going to attach the top to this one right here. And the center thing I'll attach to the top of the lower leg. And let's see. This one's a little bit ambiguous. I'm going to make it a child, make these CPs here at the bottom of the leg part of this lower foot bone, rather than making them part of the ankle. It's you could go either way on this. And it's possible after you test this rig out, you might decide to go another way. But for the moment, I'm going to presume that this will be the right way to go. Now, I need my foot bone. I'm going to attach these right here at the heel, and these right here at the toe joint. And then I'm just going to attach the tip of the toe to that toe bone. I should probably go back and either put in a fan bone for the center section or CP weight these so they're halfway between the toe and the foot, but I'm just being quick right here. And so that's assigning my first leg. Now if you had more complicated geometry along here on your multi-legged creature, you'd have to start thinking about CP weighting between these, or maybe some fan bones or something, but this is a simple structure, and I think we'll get away with what we have here. Now, I need to do that to the other legs, and that process really isn't any different than the first, so I'm going to pause the camera while I CP weight the other legs. And I'm going to, before I do that, I'm going to hide these legs and go to my second leg and expose those. And now I'll pause the camera while I associate these CPs. And I'm back, and I have associated all my CPs. While I was away, I realized that while I was doing that first leg I showed you, in attempting to select this toe bone on the screen, I had actually mistakenly selected this toe's IK control bone, which is one I don't want to associate CPs to. And so I went back and fixed that while the camera was off. And I made sure that I hadn't done that mistake on the other ones. So now I want to re-hide these geometry bones that were turned off by TSM. And let's take a quick look here and see. It looks like everything is hidden. And now we can try and give this character a test. Let's test him out by putting him in a core. So I'm going to drag him down to my blank choreography here. And let's scale him up a bit. And let's go to our director mode. And oops, looks like I left one set of bones still visible here. I'm going to go and hide those. Those are my center leg bones. There. Now back to our core, and let's see. Let's just move this body bone around. Ah, notice how nothing is, those legs are not moving with their foot bones. And that's because I forgot to turn on my TSM constraints. So I am going to turn on my pose window, make it a little larger, and TSM constraints on, and there we go. Now we can move the body around, and the legs stay put, and so we could start animating a walk. And we can select a foot and move it around, and the body stays put, which is also what we need to animate a walk. How would we animate a 5-legged creature? Before we get into that, let me point out a few other things here about our creature. We still have all the regular TSM options for legs, in which they are stretchable, and there is a visible knee pointer in case you want to shade the knee one way or another, and those are available on each leg. You also have a choice of IK or FK. It's not the seamless like we have on the Squetch rig that they made for 2, but you do have a choice there of animating your legs in IK or FK. And when you switch to FK, it makes those upper and lower leg control bones visible. But for this, I'm going to leave it on IK. The other thing I wanted to point out just about the placement of the bones, and we can see this better in the core here. I'm going to turn on make visible the bones on the first right leg, the geometry bones. And notice that I did not try to form fit these bones into the curve of the leg. These 2 upper bones of the upper leg, they need to be a straight unit, and these 2 bones of the lower leg, they also need to be a straight unit for TSM to work properly. If you had some more complex geometry that had to be on a curve, then you'd work out some kind of a fan bone in the middle here that would float around this. But with the simple geometry we have here, this is not a problem. But you don't want to bend these bones into some kind of non-straight shape, because they have to be straight so that they can do stretching and shrinking, and also so that they can be turning on the same axis. Like if you twisted this foot, so this bone can turn a little bit on the same axis as that one. That really wasn't a good example. It's really much more apparent on an arm and a wrist than it is on a foot. So how would we animate this? Let's take one try at this. I've turned on the timeline here, and I'm going to control select just a few bones. Actually, I'll turn off my timeline so I have more room to see here. I'm going to control select a few key bones here. Basically, the body bone, and these 5 IK foot controls. And now I'm going to force a keyframe on these. And let's go back to our overhead view. Let's say that creature goes forward Let's look at him from a side view, how about? And let's say he's going to move this forward that far, and then take these legs with him. And we force a keyframe in this new intermediate pose. Then we move the body forward again. And bring these other feet forward, which would be one right and one left. And now force another keyframe on all these bones. Let's do one more step. Move this body forward again. And move these back legs forward and the center foot forward. And now force a keyframe on the whole thing again. And let's see what we got here. I can tell that I need to go in and flatten my keyframes, because there's some wandering there. And you can't see this because it's falling off the screen, but I'm setting these to 0 slope. And now let's take a look at that again. So we slide the front feet forward, and the body goes forward some more. And now to make that a little bit better, let's add an intermediate where these things actually get raised in the air. In the middle there. And then we have to do this on the second step to these other feet, the front side feet. And now we do it again for these back and very center foot. Let's see what we got here. And that would be a rough take at a 5-legged walk. Only one way to do it. There are other ways you could do. You wouldn't necessarily have to do it like 3 and 2 and 3 and 2 and 3 and 2. I can imagine doing one leg at a time, or there's probably some kind of weird rotational thing you could do, where he's sort of constantly spinning sort of as he moves legs forward. Those would be very interesting to look into. But that's a quick take on animating a 5-legged creature and how to rig a 5-legged creature.